Welcome to the Friendzy.
I'm Melissa Carter.
And I'm Jenn Hobby.
Here is our promise to you. The Friendzy is here to change the conversation around age
so that you can celebrate all your years rather than lie about them.
Real stories connecting real women, even those who are sick today.
Stuffy nose.
I'm Melissa, and my brother's birthday is on July 3rd. And when I was a kid, I thought July 4th fireworks were in celebration of that because he told me so.
How cute.
Because I'm that gullible.
My name is Jenn Hobby, and when I have a mint, I sneeze. Every time.
Really?
Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
it's a body weird. And I love Altoids, but every time I eat one, I'm going to sneeze.
Oh, now I'm going to buy a box of Altoids next time we see each other. Just do it. Come on, Jenn, just take it. Just do it.
It's an involuntary reaction.
So like everybody else who has to look up at a light to sneeze, all you got to do is give Jenn a mint.
Yeah.
I never knew that. That is
mint and a light, and I'll probably sneeze twice.
She won't stop. How do you get you to stop sneezing?
Exactly.
So coming up on today's episode, we are tackling the challenge in our lives to speak up. When should you speak up? When did you stay silent and regret it? When did you speak up and get punished for it? When you speak up, how does it feel?
You're also going to meet an 87-year-old woman who has been speaking up her whole life, and she has no plans of slowing down anytime soon. She is a Spitfire named Natalie H. Rodgers, and she teaches you how to speak up in public so that your nerves don't get the best of you. You are going to absolutely adore Natalie.
So my question now is, have you subscribed to the Friendzy podcast yet? It's absolutely free, and you can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on all the platforms. And can you tell a friend about the Friendzy? We would appreciate that very much. We love being able to share these stories, real stories that connect real women.
Okay, Melissa, we're going to share some stories about speaking up in our own lives here in just a minute. But first, let's thank our sponsor.
Kick it, pajamas.
Keep singing.
Kick it, pajamas.
And if you use the code Friendzy, you'll get a 10% discount at checkout.
Dress up the warriors in your life.
That's right. Big thanks to Kick Pajamas. Is it pajamas or pajamas?
I say pajamas, but I like your Southern way of saying pajamas. Pajamas. Well, is that Southern?
Or like jammies.
Yeah.
Jammies, wearing your jammies.
Remember jams? Were you too young for that?
No, I remember jams.
There was a guy that I went to high school with. He wore jams at graduation and at senior prom.
My mom made us jams.
Really?
She sewed them for us.
Okay, man, up the game.
Okay. So Melissa Carter. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, speaking up. Yes, Jenn, speak up.
Speak up, Melissa Carter. Most people would think they don't have to tell us to speak up, but sometimes we have to be reminded of that. So let's talk about, why is it important for women to speak up? What do you think?
I think because history is written by the winners. Okay, so if anybody is like Jenn and I both did women's studies in college because we were thirsting for more history about women and not always about men, always about white men. And no offense to white men, they're not the villains necessarily, but you do need fertile ground for everybody to be represented. We know this now. We talk about this now. So that's why it's important for women to speak up, because too many times I think we have been trained to have somebody else do things for us. And we assume that somebody's going to understand us and understand our stories and write our stories and give us credit. We got to give ourselves credit. We have to be the ones to speak up and tell our stories, or nobody will know anything about them.
It's so true. And I think it's important for women to speak up because a lot of times we're taught to be compliant. You know, from little girls, we have been taught to be compliant, be quiet, be nice, be agreeable. And all those things, while they are good, they're often bad too, because they silence us in times where our opinions really count. And I believe that women bring a different perspective to any situation, whether that's career, personal life, family dynamics. And that different perspective is needed in the world. It's essential. And so if you stay quiet too long, or if you're too nice, you're like, oh, my opinion doesn't count, then the whole world misses out on you and your unique perspective.
Well, let me ask this question. So we hear that a lot. I mean, we know that we've seen studies on when a guy's aggressive, he's aggressive, and he's,
Strong.
strong, and
Yeah.
he's focused, and a woman's a bitch, she needs to know her place, that kind of thing. Even though we are aware of this and have heard conversations about this, why is it hard for women to speak up now, even when they're older, and make their opinions heard?
I think it's about a confidence issue at times where you don't feel confident. So you let that doubt step in front of your voice. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's where you have to push through that doubt and that fear and realize that anyone else who is speaking up or speaking out, whether that be in a public or in a meeting or wherever else, they also have the same amount of doubt. They're just not letting that get the best of them.
Right. They're using it as
So,
fuel rather than as something to block them. And the other thing I thought about as you're speaking is it much like a diet. We always tell people who are getting on a diet that everybody in the house should be on the same diet for you to be able to stick to it, because if you're doing it together, then you're more apt to have success with it. Well, I think it's the same thing with this. If you're somebody who has surrounded yourself with people that stifle your voice, that's also a choice that you've made, and it's going to make it harder for you to overcome that. Like, you need to look at the people in your life, I think. And for some people, they have to make the hard choices to move into a space that, like it's like a garden, right? Like if you
mhm.
are in fertile ground, you're going to grow, and if you're not in fertile ground, you're going to die. And I think your voice, I mean, it's the same thing with your voice. It should be seen as a plant that you're having to nurture.
That is such a great analogy. I also think about it from a parenting perspective. If I don't speak up, then I'm not providing the best example I can for my daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have to remember to allow their voices to be heard, to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that when we're making family decisions and they have an opinion about something, that I stop and listen to their opinion and listen to the rare reasons why they want to make a certain decision or go a certain way, so that they realize that their voice is important. And I think that this is the maybe first generation, maybe not, but first or second generation that thinks that children should have a voice,
Right.
right? We're
Right.
not the generation of kids should be seen and not heard, right?
Correct. Yes. Well, and I did something the other day that reminds me to make sure that with my son, I have to set a good example for my son, because I want to show him, I'm the example for him of how he should see women. And he doesn't know me from the radio. He only knows me from home. And so I was we were getting in the car the other day, and he got in a lot of trouble this week. He had done something bad. So he was banned from games for a week. And he is an intelligent man, and so he's always like not negotiating, not
Mhm.
manipulating, but he's trying to see what he can get away with. And so he'll ask a question like, well, is this considered a game? Can I do this?
Right. Yeah.
And so the question was, at school, he has a school iPad, and they have educational games on there. So he said, are those considered video games?
Mm.
And it was a good question. And so my first response was, let's check with your mother, right? Let's just check with Katie Joe. And then I thought in my mind, but see, in his mind, you gave him a subservient, like, oh, well, we have to see what your mother says, not what I say. And
Right.
in my mind,
Okay.
I was saying that because I was like, I need to check with her to make sure that we agree on that, because that's a good question, but that's not how I said it. So then I thought twice about that, and I stopped and I said, the reason we need to talk to your mother is because your mother and I make the decisions together. So my answer is no, but I need to check with your mother so that we can make sure that we're always on the same page when it comes to you. So I
Right.
supplemented it with, I
Yes.
have an answer, and here's my answer, instead of, because in my mind, I knew what I meant. But for him, I just was worried at his misperception of me being the weaker one.
That's
And
important to
yeah,
clarify, that
exactly.
you've got an opinion, she's got an opinion, and you make that decision together.
Yeah.
A recent example of this in our parenting was we had decided to go for a super long walk as a family the other day. We were going to walk like a mile and a half one way and a mile and a half home. It was
Mm.
a bit aggressive. It was
For a
a
little, yeah.
challenge, because my girls are 8 and 5. We were like, "We can do it as a family. Let's go." And we offered them a reward at the end if they were up for it. So, my oldest wanted ice cream and my youngest wanted bubble gum. She loves that bubble tape.
Oh,
Do you
yeah,
know
yeah,
do you
yeah.
remember bubble tape?
I
Yeah.
do.
So we were
I
like,
had Big
okay.
League Chew. I'm sorry. I did the shredded gum, but
Oh
I do
yeah,
know
that
the
was
bubble
good
tape.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We walk for a mile and a half to the square in our little town, and we get lunch, we get ice cream, and then it's kind of time to walk back home because we're sort of running out of time. We didn't really time manage very well.
Mhm.
But the little one wanted gum, and it was another 3 blocks to go get the gum and the reward. But I was like, you know what? We got to make sure that her voice is heard here,
Right.
because we're teaching her lessons on whether she's important or not if we follow through on this. It's in our mind, it's just bubble gum, and it's 3 more blocks that they're not going to want to walk, 3 more
Right.
blocks back that we're not going to want to walk. But in her mind, she'll get the message that her voice doesn't count. So we're walking for the bubble gum, and we did.
I love that. What and there's some people who I know who are like, your child doesn't dictate the situations. Your child isn't in charge, you're in charge. And I understand that philosophy. And that's the majority of the time is the child knows the hierarchy.
Sure.
But I do think we have seen, and this the audience we're talking to, a whole generations of people who were seen and not heard,
Mhm.
and it permeates throughout their life, in which they decide, well, it's just easier not to say anything because nobody's going to care.
Mm.
And so I think it's important to start that when they're young, and for them, like we were starting music lessons for Mr. Carter this summer because he tends to like music and lean toward it. So we wanted to try.
Yeah.
And we went to a music place where they introduced the kids to all the instruments, right? And so before we went for our introductory session, I let him know the instruments I played. I let him know the instruments his uncle played. My brother had played clarinet, and I played alto sax because it was the 80s. And I also played drums. And so I was like,
Why
letting
am
him,
I hearing Kenny G right
I'm
now?
I mean, I was the thing. But I showed him drums, and I tried to explain, but I told him, I said, it's very important for you to understand that this is your choice and whatever you're interested in. So just because I'm excited to tell you about how it was to play drums, or, alto sax, I wasn't excited about, but, but I said, but it's your choice. I just want to give you an example that other people have done music and it's fun. And so I reiterated that to him. I said, I don't want you to do what I like. I want you to do what you like, because you're more apt to practice whatever instrument you're into. So please, let's not spend hundreds of dollars. I didn't say that to him, but in my mind, I'm thinking, let's not spend hundreds of dollars on something that you're going to give up, like I did. I traded my alto sax for a set of drums, much to my parents,
Oh,
frustration.
God, love your parents for
Oh,
listening to that.
so, but but it's the same thing. Like in the back of my mind, I am raising an adult. I'm not raising a child. And I think so many people, like when I hear people say, "Oh, where did the baby go? Where's my baby?" And it's like, you need to change your perspective. My son is a grown man in a little boy's body, and it's my job to get him from that little boy to that grown man.
Mm.
And so there's so many times when I have these conversations that I'm trying to have it with the grown man. And so that he'll remember as a grown man, you know what it is, I should follow my interests. I'm more apt to do it longer if it's something I'm interested in. We'll see if it sticks, but that's my parenting philosophy too, is trying to teach him that I want you to know that you're going to be an adult, and these are important things as an adult. I don't talk to him like a kid. I don't talk down to him, and I certainly don't listen to his opinion.
Yeah, and it's about using your voice, and his opinion and his interests are part of his voice and part of speaking up. So I want to hear some stories from you. Tell us a
Yes.
story of when you spoke up and it was a great result.
Coming out. I mean, that's the first thing. I know plenty of people who were still in the closet as senior citizens at this point, that people who were so afraid of being rejected that they kept their life to themselves. And I got to tell you, there's a part of me that's healing from my past. I guess everybody at this age too. Part of not caring what other people think, I do think, is also exploring yourself more. That's what we talk about here on the Friendzy. Jenn has got all the self-help books that's ever been published. But I think it's natural, because at this point you're through processing. You're at least for me, I'm through with wanting to process the past. Like I want to just get rid of it
Mm.
and just focus on the future, which I should, which you should do when you're young, but sometimes it's hard. But I truly did not enjoy my high school years, and I mourn the loss of a normal high school because I knew I was gay. I had already been with a woman in high school on the down low, but I dated guys to make sure my reputation was not, adversely affected. I didn't come out until I was 25,
Can you
but
tell us a little bit about that? Like, so when you're
sure.
25, what's the tipping point and how did that conversation go?
I was tired of lying because when you
Mhm.
live in the closet, you have to create lies and you have to
Mm.
keep up with them.
Ugh, that's
And
exhausting.
it's like you're a spy, right? You
Yeah.
you live a
Ugh.
you live a different life. You have to, I've known friends who like they go out with friends and then they go home and then they go out again to the gay bars, right? So
Mm.
friends think, "Oh, we went out to the straight clubs." And then
Wow.
they have to live an extra life because they end their evening later somewhere else. And, it was just, I got tired of lying. I was physically exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted. And I happened to work at Oxford Bookstore in Atlanta, which is an iconic bookstore no longer around. And there were other people there that were gay. And I remember telling somebody, broaching the subject with somebody that I was gay just to try it out, see how it felt off my
Mhm.
tongue. And he said, "Well, yeah, you're in the majority of people here." Like he was like, because he could sense that I was nervous about telling him, and he's like, "But I'm the minority. I'm the straight minority." He said, "You don't understand that you're just like everybody else here." Like, and so the
Mm.
fact that he just kind of blew it off was not the reaction I was expecting because I had talked myself into thinking that everybody's gonna, tell me I'm gonna burn in hell.
Mm.
And so usually when people are in the closets because their family doesn't know,
Mhm.
and you try it out on friends first, but you have to eventually tell your family. And I told my brother first, and my
Mm.
brother's reaction was, "Well, tell me something I didn't already know." I'm like, "You did?" And he goes, "Yes, of course I did." So that it was
That's
easy to tell the
awesome.
rest of my family. I mean, well, my father is, and I've told this story before, I'm sure, but my father, um, he was the last for me to have the conversation with.
Mhm.
And I said, "I thought you would be the very one to reject me." Because by the time I got to him, I was relaxed, right? I had a sister
Mhm.
and a brother and a mother who were fine with it. And he said, "Well, and I said, because of he was the religious rock of the family. He was very conservative and very religious. And he said, "Well, Jesus wouldn't have rejected you, so why should I?"
Mm.
And I'll never forget that line.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget his example of being a Christian, right? So
Mhm.
I measure other Christians to him.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so that's me speaking my voice. And, you've heard, I think Audre Lorde is the one who coined the phrase, speak even if your voice is shaking.
Mm.
And sometimes when you're speaking up, your heart is racing, your hands are shaking, your voice is shaking, you're on the verge of tears, but getting through that mental barrier that I had created for myself freed my life I can't even tell you the difference between being in
Mm.
the closet and being out of the closet, being a liar and being able to live my life authentically with people who truly love me, and to be happy. And ever since then, even though people have told me I'm going to burn in hell, since then it doesn't matter, because once you're out and comfortable with your
Mhm.
environment, it doesn't matter what other people say. So to me, the greatest result I've ever had in speaking out is by being out. And
Mhm.
the influence that I've had on other people who are gay that I don't even know about, but those that I know about, has been the greatest reward of that's kind of like the ripple effect of it, where I've helped and give other people confidence to do the same thing with their lives. So it speaking up, to me, if you're speaking from an authentic place, and in my case it was like a desperate place, is always the right thing to do, because
Mhm.
this is your life and you need to live it, and you need to stop having other people dictate to you what your life should be like. So that's my story. Now
That's
I want
awesome.
now I hate to turn it around, but I'm curious too, because there are people who are afraid to speak out and get bad results. Is there a time where you've spoken out and the result wasn't as rosy as I portrayed.
Yes. Definitely. I will say I have a positive and negative. So let me start with the positive though, and this is just on the work front, because Melissa and I work in radio and have for many years. It's a very male-dominated industry and kind of behind the times in media. When in television you've got Oprah and Ellen hosting shows and for some reason in radio, it's always been about the men and the women were the co-hosts, the secondary.
Yep.
And so
and let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there. I challenge the audience to think of every morning show you've loved and think about what the name of the morning show was, no matter where in the country you live.
Yeah.
And I guarantee it's Bob and Jane. It's Tim and, Barbara. It's always the guy's name first.
And it still is a little stuck in that way. And so there's a story of when I spoke up and it was a really good result. So we always each year can go to a convention, right? A radio convention. And each year at that convention, they would have a woman's panel, women in radio, right? And I had done that panel many times. And the organizer of the event and I had become close. His name's Don. And Don called me up and said, "Hey, Jenn, this year's, boot camp's going to be in Chicago, blah, blah, blah. I want you to be on the women's panel." And I said, "Don, I am so sick of being on your women's panel. Why does it have to be that women in radio only get to be on the women's panel? Why aren't we on all the other panels?" And he's like, "Well, I know this is last minute, but he had his whole convention all set up already. And somebody had to back out and he needed me to fill in." And I said, "Okay, Don, I'm going to do you this favor." And this is where I had to have the courage to speak up. I said, "I will join your women's panel this year. If next year you let me host my own panel and it has nothing to do with my vagina."
Nice.
And he laughed. Now, I could say that because we were friends at that point, right? And he knew me well enough that I could go there. "It's going to have nothing to do with gender, Don." And he said, "You got it." So sure enough, I did his women's panel, did what he needed me to do. And the next year I got to host a panel about show chemistry. And I put people on it that were all colors, all genders, all ages, and who had different sexual preferences. I put everybody on there that I knew in radio had something to say so that they could speak up and share their story. And it was fantastic. It had great reviews. And I feel like, not to take credit for this, but I feel like it propelled some of those people.
You should take credit. See, you can't even give that disclaimer. You should take credit for it. You created the panel. The panel wouldn't have been. See, you go back to that default of, well, I not take too much credit for this. You created that panel.
Okay, but the people on that panel are now considered leaders in our industry because I was able to highlight them with that panel. But none of it would have happened if I didn't have the guts to speak up and negotiate a way to do it in a very male-dominated industry. If I had not said anything, that year's convention would have just gone on with all these guys who have had their own morning show for 25 years, and they sit on stage and say the same thing year after year and brag about themselves. Okay? Which a lot of people learn a lot from. But there was no way to elevate other people that were coming up in the industry. Because if they were a woman, they got relegated to the women's panel. If they were, a gay guy, they got relegated to something else. And it was like, let's just talk about radio and have a whole bunch of different people represented up there. And let's not make it about our gender or our race or our sexual orientation. Let's just make it about being people in radio.
Well, it shows that, our industry is, having struggles professionally. And that's why I think podcasting has become so popular because people are able to create their own story, display their own stories regardless of where they come from. But I commend you for that because, like you said, it's something that needed to be said. And it makes you realize that everybody who's ever said anything that seems logical, that is different, had fear before they said it. Don't discount the Oprahs and before Ellen was Rosie O'Donnell had her own great show back in the day, and actually beat Oprah in the ratings at one point. And these women, however you feel about them, were the ones that had to when they were nervous and when they were frustrated and when they thought, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, went ahead and pushed through and
You
did
know
it.
who else I think of is Kelly Ripa. Because
Yes.
she was, it was Regis and Kathy Lee, then it was Regis and Kelly. And when Regis decided not to renew his deal and move on, Kelly had to get in there and say, I'm the lead on this show now.
Yeah.
I'm the one who gets to pick
Michael
the co-host.
Strahan, and even Michael Strahan,
Yeah.
that drama with Michael Strahan, like I lost a complete amount of respect for him during the drama of his departure from that show because he did not show Kelly respect, even though she was the lead on that show. And it's
right.
hard for people to see women as leaders. And it goes back to, the leaders we have. So many times those women who were strong leaders have been criticized for either not being pretty enough, not being charming enough, not smiling enough, and it's like, and you hear women say these things about these women. And it's like, I feel that's a huge betrayal because look at what you're saying. Like a woman has to be sexually attractive for her to be able to do anything. And it's like, why is our sexuality continuing to be the main focus of who we are? And we have got to get out of that habit. We've got to get out of that.
And you realize that if you see it, you can be it. So if we're going to make progress as women, we have to speak up. You in your life, and no matter what you do in your career or what you do in your family or what your role is, you got to speak up. Because then the next generation, it will be normalized. Now that we have female political leaders, now that we have leaders that are CEOs and in the C-suite, now we can see it. Now they can be it. It will normalize all of it, which I love, with us raising the next generation of leaders.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So Melissa Carter, have you ever stayed silent and regretted it?
Yes. Here's the first, it's going to seem so stupid, but it goes back to what you said earlier about, the tape gum, right? Where it's like, it's for adults, it's tape gum, for a child, it's a big deal. So this has to do with, I think I was in the first or second grade. And it's the first time I remember staying silent and regretting it. Okay. So this is my first, the emotion of it was one of great embarrassment. So we had come back from recess. Okay. And I was just scratching my hair, and felt a bump. And I thought, well, let me pick at this bump, and it ended up being a tick. Okay. So small town, Tennessee, recess is out where there's ticks. So I picked this tick off my head. And for some reason I internalized that I'm at fault for bringing a tick in the classroom. Like poor little Melissa just had I was so insecure. And so did I get up and put it in the trash? Did I tell the teacher? Did I wrap it up in a paper, paper towel or something? No, I let it go on the ground. And I watched it crawl. Like we were not in class. We were like in little play groups, right? And I watched it crawl all the way to Melissa Moncrief. And I watched it crawl up Melissa Moncrief's leg. And I watched it crawl up Melissa Moncrief's arm. And then Melissa looked down and said, oh, look, a tick. And the teacher's like, oh, my goodness. And took it and threw it away. Killed it and threw it away. And it was just like that. But in my mind, I held that guilt for so long that I'm the one that brought it in. I'm the one that let it go. And I'm the one I truly, it's shocking how my life has evolved, because as a little kid, I was the one that never spoke. Like I was too afraid to tell anybody about a simple tick.
Did you think you were going to be ashamed because you had the tick?
No
like
idea.
It was somehow your fault?
I think it was that carrying this idea of, I don't know. I had and it's this, and I still have the echoes of it. If I'm not perfect, then I'm not lovable. So if I do something wrong, like bring a tick, like how in the world is that my fault? But yeah, so that's the first time. I know it's a silly story, but it's the first time that I remember feeling guilty for not saying something. Yeah. Like I didn't protect Melissa Moncrief from a tick that could have gotten in her head. And for her, she just batted it off, like it was it's a normal occurrence in a small town when you got a bunch of trees and bushes and you got ticks. But yeah, so that's the Tick and Melissa because I remember Melissa Moncrief's name
I
based on
know.
that story.
I'm
She
like,
moved away. I didn't even
you were
graduate with the
you were in
girl.
first grade, and now you're 51, and this is still bugging you. You didn't
Still,
speak up at the time.
because it was the first time that I ever didn't speak up
Oh
in
my gosh.
public for something that was right, which is a tick. Anyway, so I'm, so it shows you that if you're listening and you have this regret of not saying something, just know that it's bigger in your mind than it ever would have been had you said anything,
Right.
right? I
Right.
would not have gotten in trouble. The teacher probably would have checked on me and checked my head and made sure I was okay, like nurtured me, but I didn't give her the opportunity because I was too afraid that I was going to get in trouble somehow.
Oh my god, poor little Melissa. I
I
just wanna
know.
hug little first grade Melissa.
She's pitiful. I'm telling you,
Oh,
little
no,
Melissa was
she's
pitiful.
not. Innocent and sweet and kind. Oh my gosh. I've definitely in my life stayed silent and regretted it. My example is another work example. Um, there's a personal one too, but I would say it was in working with somebody who treated others poorly, and I didn't speak up soon enough. One, because I don't think I witnessed what was going on. The person who treated other team members so badly was very manipulative about it and made it seem as if it was everyone else's fault or everyone else's shortcomings that was the reason why he had an issue with them. But this person just constantly picked on other people at work. It was not only like bosses, but also what are team members that are like a lower rank than you?
I mean, subordinates sounds,
Subordinates. I
yeah,
know that
sounds
sounds
so
like a weird.
condescending, but
Right, but other team
up and
members,
comers, up and comers.
okay, up and coming team members. It was coworkers that were on the same level. It was everybody. And he always had something negative to say about them, about their performance, about everything else. And so at first I did not recognize what was going on. At first I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe there is a flaw there that we could work on, or there's a skill that needs to come up to speed or whatever." Well, over time, I started to realize, "No, no, no. This is not the fault of all these other people. This is not the shortcomings of everyone
The common
else."
denominator, right?
Right. This is the way that this person makes themselves look better. This is the way this person doesn't accept responsibility for what's going on.
And
This
here's
person
another
just
and
points
here's
the finger and blames other people. And so
yeah.
I
I was gonna
yeah.
say because it's a guy, there's a
Yeah.
lot of people, including yourself, that for a moment you thought, well, let me listen to his opinion.
Yeah.
If a woman's at work doing that and constantly doing that, number one, she would probably get disciplined first, sooner than a guy would be disciplined for that. But she would be labeled like, oh God, like I can't stand to be around her. I can't, whatever. There's somehow a subtle respect for a guy, even when he's an ass, than there is when a woman
Right.
does the same
Well,
thing.
and it just took me way too long to discover the pattern, but it was person after person, time after time after time. And that's one time I regret not speaking up as soon as I figured it out. Because as soon as I figured it out, it was too late. There had been too many people who had been let go from their jobs because of
Because of
this.
him. Wow.
Yes. Or too many people who had quit, talented people, great human beings who had either quit or been fired because of this other person. And I regret not speaking up sooner because it wasn't right. It just
I
took
doubt
me
that
so long to figure it out.
I doubt you're the only one that's ever experienced that. I do think that, in radio, there's a lot of ego driven people who turn that into a negative experience. But I'm sure in most people's corporate worlds, because again, an aggressive man tends to, at least, and hopefully that's changing a little bit, but an aggressive man tends to get rewarded. And then eventually that aggressive men can be shoved in different places, because usually what happens is, and you see this in stories, religious bodies of aggressive men who aren't doing good things, they, instead of like getting blasted and ridiculed, they just kind of they push them along like somebody else's problem. This is going to be somebody else's problem. So again, I just think that, yeah, I mean, it's not to vilify men, but it's like the reward system we have for aggressive men, I think needs to slow down. Like, I think if it's an aggressive man who's doing good, an aggressive man who is actually inspiring people, unlike the person you're talking about, if it's a mentor, if it's an aggressive guy who's like, well, because I've known men who, they have their shortcomings, but that's 20% of the 80% of how they mentor and how they do things. So not,
To me, it's about strength of character,
yeah,
right? If they
yes,
have an internal strength of good character and their style is aggressive, well, that can be really productive in the workplace and that can be
right.
really great.
That's a great point.
But if they don't have that strength of character, then they're just egomaniacs, that
Well,
are
and a lot of people don't want to there's a lot of people who just, I don't want to deal with it. I think
yeah.
for a lot of people, when they don't speak up, it's masked by this. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be bothered. And so I'll just avoid. Most people just avoid instead of speaking because they just don't want their life to be interrupted, or they, and it takes a lot of courage, because in a case like that, if it's at work, if your job's on the line and your
Yeah.
livelihood's on the line, then, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to speak up. And that's why it's very important for people to put people in positions of leadership that don't make their employees feel oppressed. You don't want to be, because to me, what I don't understand about in home, it's the same with who you choose to be in your home. I don't understand this ability for people to you be in a work environment, because work is supposed to bring you money for livelihood. Like, I guess my point is, I don't understand living a life that you're unhappy in. The point of living is to be happy. Especially if you or someone who has had young children, look at them. The point of life is to be happy and curious and excited and try new things. And somehow we get shaved down to a tired adult who just would rather I just don't want to, I just leave me alone. And that's not a happy life. And so sometimes you do have to speak up and tell your story in order to shift the path that your life is going on. You can't this go along, get along. I can tell you from firsthand experience of my personality, go along, get along is not always good for you.
Agreed. Agreed. And in that situation, when I found a trusted man with strength of character to confide in my workplace, to say, I need to speak up. This is not right. What's going on? I was heard. Right. So I think that it was a good result in the end, but took me far too long to get there.
Well, let me ask the question. So we talk about speaking up. When you speak up, how does it feel? Like once you do it, I've talked about how it feels when you don't do it or when you're going to do
Yeah.
it. But when you had that strength of character man who helped you in your work environment, how did it feel to be able to speak up, or in
It
any other situation?
it was terrifying at the outset and relieving at the end. It just felt like a breath of fresh air. Like, okay, all that had been stored up and inside, and I was afraid to speak up. And then when I did, it was received in a way that was like embraced and understood and listened to thoroughly and processed and respected. And so it felt great. It felt great. What about you? I mean, when you speak up in situations, whether that's in conflict or in situations in your personal life, how does it feel to speak up?
If I'm speaking up from a strength of character, so I do think, speaking up in an argument is different than speaking up for yourself in like you said, a strength of character and authentically. It could be an argument, but I'm saying that, when it gets out of hand, that's not speaking up. We're talking about speaking up to just tell your story and tell your opinion. And I think I feel reset. I feel like I go back to
Oh,
center. I
good.
feel like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm back where I need to be. That whole journey got me back to where that starting point I need to be at to go in the correct direction. And I think that, you make a great point. So many people don't speak up because they're afraid of the critics,
Mhm.
when they don't understand that when you speak up, there's going to be so many minions that are going to be so excited that you said something. Because usually if you feel something strongly, you're not the only one.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
and going back to my example of coming out, like when I was the first to come out in Atlanta on morning radio. Like I was the first to do that. And there had been gay people on the radio. There had been, side characters that came on that were caricatures, but there had been nobody at the time and since, really, except maybe
Wow.
one, who has come out on the radio to say, this is who I am, and I'm going to talk about my life without apology.
Mhm.
And in
And
doing
without becoming a caricature
without becoming a
of a
character,
stereotype.
I was not a I was never treated like a stereotype.
Right.
I never allowed myself to be treated like a stereotype.
Mhm.
And the result was, yes, there was plenty of people who vowed they would never listen to the radio station again. Of course I had people who at one station we had the Barn family. I told you this story, haven't I? So I was hosting
I
a
don't think
show.
so.
I was hosting a show. Of course, my name was second, but I was hosting a show, even though I asked for my name to be first. That's for the book, right, Jen?
Yes.
Um,
I've got
but
more stories for the book.
we got more stories for the book. But I was hosting a show and I was out, and I am fortunate that I never worked for a company that had a problem with that. Obviously, I would not work for them if they ever did. But we got a morning show call of the Barn family. That's who we called them, the Barn family. And they called to say,
Because their last name was Barn, or they
no,
lived in a
no, I'm
barn?
about to tell you.
Oh, okay.
They were a family. They were gathering the family in the barn as the person called. Okay. They were listening to the show.
Okay.
And the fact that I was gay, and it was a transition. So I was newer on the show and I was gay, and they'd been listening to that radio station for a long time. So they were gathering the family in the barn to discuss whether or not they would continue to listen to the radio station. And I think they called to inform that the vote had been no, that they weren't going to listen to us anymore, but something, and we called them the Barn family. So there was a whole family of farmers who got together in the barn to discuss me and my sexuality, and then decided to reject me, which I doubt they stopped listening forever. I'm sure they still listen to the show. But yeah, the barn. So I had people who let me know that they're, I guess they wanted the effort they made to vote. But it didn't bother me because the same time I had people who called, who the ones that tear me up the most are the mothers that called, who said, I grew up with you and I listened to you, and of course I accepted you. It was no big deal, but I didn't understand the importance of you until my child is in the back seat at 12 and 13 and say, Mom, I think I'm gay. And they would write me and say, thank you for everything you did, because I knew how to handle my child because of you, because without you, I think I would have just gone back into the same old routine that everybody else does, which is, well, don't tell anybody. Are you sure? Because that's usually the questions people ask is, are you sure? Are you kind of young to, you're kind of young to determine that. However, if they said I'm straight at 12 and 13, it would be celebrated. Nobody tells their straight kid, are you sure you're young? You're kind of young at 13 to want a boyfriend. Nobody ever says that. So, so don't forget that when you speak up, there's a group of people who lives will change because you told your true story.
And I do believe that the Barnes family life will change too. The Barn family talked about it.
Somebody in that barn was gay and was afraid to say anything.
But they talked about it as a family. It became a topic of discussion. And just like those mothers, it could be a very delayed reaction to acceptance or understanding, or maybe even just a curiosity to understand somebody that may not be like them. You planted the seed. So either way, even with the Barn family, I think, either way with the reaction, whatever the reaction is, planting that seed by speaking up is important. And so, so I'm proud of you. It's awesome.
As we finish, this part of the show up, it's important to reiterate the fact that Jen and I told you stories in which we spoke up, even though we were nervous to do it. And it absolutely changed other people's lives. Like you creating that radio panel changed the careers of people. You speaking up for for a colleague that wasn't so great, kept other people from having to lose their jobs because of that colleague, right? And for me, there are people who are accepting of their children and change the trajectory of those children's lives simply because I told my story. So don't discount your story, whatever it is, and that there will be people who, we had the benefit of being on radio and having emails and people reach out to us. But I think that the courage for those who are not in media, you tell your story, understand that there are going to be people in your families and your communities that are going to look towards you and you're going to change their lives for the better. And they'll never be able to tell you because they won't feel comfortable coming to you and saying it. Right. But you have to have trust and faith that a story has ripple effects. And think of your own life and the story somebody told you and how it changed your life. So I just think keeping your mouth shut is never the right thing to do. Never the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So keep speaking up, ladies, and the couple gentlemen that might listen.
They do. And thank you for listening. Our guest today is Natalie H. Rodgers, an author who reached out to us directly and was such a spitfire that we had to book her here on the Friendzy.
Melissa and I got this email from her. It says, "Dear Jenn and Melissa, my name is Natalie H. Rodgers. I am 87 years old. I look 20 years younger, exercise every day, and eat healthy. I've been lying about my age for many years. Now I'm happy to say that I have turned the corner. I'm proud of being 87 years old. I have a book coming out in July called Talk Power, The Mind-Body Way to Speak Without Fear. I write poetry about women. I am an accomplished tango dancer. I would be a great guest for the Friendzy because when it comes to the subject of aging, I know all the ins and outs."
I mean, how do you say no to that? Right? I mean, because I think I said "atta girl" when I saw the tango the original time. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome to the delightfully feisty author and tango dancer, atta girl, Natalie H. Rodgers, to the Friendzy.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk with you today. I have to tell you, you're such a spitfire. I got your email and I said, I have to talk to her immediately because you were just like, you know what? You're doing a show called The Friendzy. You need me on your show. You said, I've been lying about my age for so long and I'm not anymore. And we need to talk. And I thought, you know what? Yes, we do.
Yes, indeed. I was thrilled when I got your emails. Oh my God, we got a hit.
Well, Natalie is a psychotherapist, an actress, and an author, and we're going to talk to her in depth about her book called Talk Power. It's the mind-body way to speak without fear, and I'm so interested in diving into your expertise. But first, let's let everybody get to know you a little bit first. So, Natalie, tell us a little background on your story. Like, where did you grow up?
I grew up part of the time in Brooklyn. And I anticipated the flower children. I left home at a very early age. I got married because I wanted to leave home when I was like 16 years old. And I've been on my own ever since. But then I married my real husband and I had a daughter. She lives in California. That's my biggest accomplishment. With all the things I've done, I have a happy daughter who's married to a fabulous guy. And they have a wonderful life. 2 little boys. One is 9 and one is 7, Leo and Ben.
Wonderful.
And unfortunately, they live in California and I live in Manhattan.
Okay.
It's a long answer.
No, it's a great answer. So growing up where you came from, tell me about how that shaped you.
Well, I really have to say, now that the Me Too has come out, I'm going to say this. One of the most important things that happened to me is that when I was 11 years old, I was molested. And that's kind of shocking to just, I hardly know you, and I'm telling you, but it really influenced the rest of my life. And what I have to say is, if that had an effect, I had post-traumatic stress. We didn't know what that was at the time. If that had such an effect, and he never penetrated me, I wasn't raped, I was just molested, and I thought he would never let me out of this basement where I was. Can you imagine what it happens to a woman when she's actually raped? Can you imagine if this happened to me and it wasn't even a huge thing, it was a terrible thing. So that really had a very big influence on my life. And I kind of wandered around. I was on my own for a very, very long time. And then I married my husband and we formed a theater company. I'll tell you, I had been an airline stewardess, then I was a singer. I traveled all over the world singing. I was in South America, in Aruba, in San Juan. I just made the rounds. And eventually I became an actress and I met my husband and we formed a theater company, the Dove, D-O-V, anti-war theater company that was in Manhattan. And we were in a church for many, many years, and we did these original productions. But we were incredibly poor. We were so poor. We charged $1 at the door. Can you imagine? My husband refused to, he was of the people, would not raise the fee. So finally I said, listen, I have to go to school. I never went to college. I don't have a degree. It's very embarrassing. I'm working as a waitress. That's the best I can do. So I went to school for 7 years. Oh, and then I became pregnant. I had a baby. So I had a baby. I went to school miraculously, and I became a psychotherapist. And wow. I still am a psychotherapist. But in the midst of it, I developed because of my theater background and my psychotherapy, I developed a neuroscientific method for training people who are extremely nervous about speaking in public. It's called Panic Clinic for Public Speaking, Talk Power.
Okay.
And this is, it's so different than what they teach in school and academically. It's a mind-body approach. There are exercises, routines, all kinds of different things you do with your body so that your brain develops the wiring so that when people are looking at you, you're not thinking about them. And usually people have this problem and say, oh, I'm so ugly, I'm boring, I'm going to forget everything, I'm going to have a panic attack. That's what they're thinking while they're standing up there. They're not thinking that anymore. They're just focusing their attention on what they have to say. It's unbelievable. I've been doing this for 35 years.
You're so awesome, Natalie. I wanted to ask you about this connection from what happened to you when you were young to becoming a psychotherapist. Those two have to be strongly connected, right?
Well, I never thought of it that way. I thought that being an actress and I was very intuitive and very creative, and I just love to talk to people, and I'm always solving problems. And I think I didn't bring them together, but after our interview, I'm going to think about that and how that's related. Maybe also because I had so many terrible therapists, terrible.
Yes. Terrible therapists can really drain your wallet, can't they?
Right, that's their goal, really.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Be plumbers and dishwashers and whatever they should not be therapists.
Right. So with this career path, because I definitely want to dive into all of your public speaking techniques, but I want to learn a little bit more about your career path as an actress and starting your theater company. What's been a highlight for you in those worlds and also in your singing career?
Well, in my singing career, it was traveling. First I did that. And the thing was that everything was couch casting, everything, to get a manager. So, and I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. All these old men that were after me, so my career did not go very far. It just stayed on that level. I was a singer. I got booked into different hotels and and I traveled. And that was very exciting and wonderful. But my career could not move because I couldn't get involved with any of these people who could really be of great assistance to me. Yeah. It just was, it was impossible. I never even considered it for 2 seconds. I just couldn't do it.
Right. Well, and Natalie, we touched on this at the beginning about you lying about your age for years. Can you tell us how old you are now and how old you were when you were going through your singing career?
Well, I'm 87 years old now, believe it or not.
I do not believe it. No. Everyone has to watch this interview on YouTube because you will not believe it either. 87. You're fantastic. You look amazing.
I know. Well, because, I exercise every day. Since I'm an actress, actresses know how to take care of their bodies. So I exercise every day. I jump on a trampoline. I do all kinds of stretching. And I happen to like healthy food. I'm not much of a drinker. Like I'll have a glass of wine at dinner, but months could pass and I don't have anything to drink. And I was a big smoker many, many years ago. I don't smoke. And I think, and I do what I like to do. I'm in loving. I don't have many conflicts or any conflicts at this point, except that thing that I'm like Snoopy dragging around that suitcase behind me with a rope, with that thing that happened to me, which I really can't completely get rid of. It's there. But I think I have a wonderful life and I'm very satisfied with my daughter. They call me about 4 times a week and we talk on Skype. And my book Talk Power, The Mind Body Way to Speak Without Fear. I'm always telling people, tell the name of your book, is going to come out in July 17th. And that has all of the techniques that I have in my workshop. You could actually get the workshop if you buy my book. And so you asked me about the highlights. So it was really the traveling and the gowns and the whole thing, singing. And I was kind of like a half a jazz singer, semi-jazz and pop.
That's awesome.
And then, acting was incredible. My husband, Harold Herbstman, who passed away, unfortunately, about 20 years ago, he started this theater in this church. And they built a kind of a stage that was collapsible. So Saturday night we would take it apart because they would have a service on Sunday, and then we would put it together again. We did all the classics. We did Hedda Gabler, and many new, modern, original plays that people brought to us. And of course, we were an anti-war against the Vietnam War, and so we had all kinds of plays like that. And I have to calm down. I'm so excited about this interview.
You're so adorable. I can't get enough of you. I love all your different experiences, and your psychotherapy career combined with all your performance career comes together perfectly for Talk Power. And I want to ask you about public speaking, because on the Friendzy podcast, Melissa and I talk a lot about people sharing their story and the importance of that, and people using their voice, specifically women who are often silenced throughout their life. We're taught growing up that we should be quiet and compliant and all those things. And we're trying to reverse that, because once you reach a certain age, you stop trying to please everyone else and you need to start using your voice. So can you talk a little bit about public speaking and the importance of women using their voice?
If you don't use your voice, you are invisible. You're really invisible. In your voice, expressing your opinion, expressing your point of view gives you presence. Now, fear of speaking in public is the number one phobia in America. And that Seinfeld joke, somebody giving a eulogy would rather be inside the coffin.
Right. That's a great joke. I haven't heard that before.
So now the way that they teach public speaking in school is a disgrace. And that's where I got the idea. So I was an actress for years, and we were very poor, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I said, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a degree. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but in school, but the story is that I was the acting teacher at the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan. And I realized, and it was a kind of a social work placement. In other words, social workers came to work with an actress, and they chose me because I wasn't a social worker, but I was an actress. I could conduct a class like that. And in talking to the woman who was the supervisor, I began to learn about social work. That if you became a social worker, you didn't have to have a PhD, but you could be a therapist. And so from that point, it seemed to me, since I was really great with people and I was very intuitive, that I would become a therapist. And so that's the direction I majored in psychology. And then I had a scholarship at Columbia for my MSW, my master's degree in social work. By that time, I had a baby, an infant. And so I was going to school. I had the baby. I was very fortunate. I had neighbors in my building who were crazy about my baby. So they used to take the baby in every single day. It's just unbelievable the way things fell into place. So when I went to school, I took a course in public speaking. All right. And it was horrible.
Really? In what ways?
Well, first of all, the people were very, very nervous. I never thought about it. You see how I'm talking. I was like always Miss Filibuster, raising her hand. I couldn't wait to talk because I had a very supportive, fantastic mother. She thought I was the God's gift to the world. So naturally.
And she was right. She was right.
So anyway, and the teacher they were very nervous, and the speeches were so boring and repetitive, and they would be moving around, and everything was, in action. So I said, my goodness, this isn't the way I was trained. I was trained in the Stanislavski method. It was systematic, step by step, and you did this exercise and that exercise, and it did something for you. Now, this is like 40 years ago. So all the brain research that's been done in the past 40 years was certainly not there at that time. But what was going on was with the Stanislavski method, something was happening to the brain that was training, and it's called plasticity, the brain's ability to change itself.
I took a Stanislavski course in high school, so I know what you mean. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so there was nothing systematic. It was just a little information, tips, hints, suggestions. Imagine everybody sitting on the toilet. I mean, it was a disgrace. So I had an aha moment. I said to myself, why don't I make a series of exercises that I had been experimenting with the actors for performance? Not acting, performance. And at that time, I never realized that there was a difference between acting and performance, but there's a big difference. You know, would you ever think of that?
Acting. Well, yeah, as an actor, you're taking on the role of someone who's not you, but as a performer, you're being you, which is almost scarier, I would imagine.
The important thing about performance is you're doing something where people are looking at you. And that's the problem. It's never mentioned in any public speaking class. The problem is people are looking at you. And that's where the performer falls apart. They won't do it at all. So I was when I was with the acting, when I was the acting teacher at our theater, I was working on performance skills, slowing down, taking control, and so on. So I developed a whole series of steps that you do even before you even get up in front of the class. So at that time, I was teaching assertiveness training at Baruch College. So I went to the person in charge of the program and I said, listen, I want to teach a public speaking class. She said, oh, well, we already have a public speaking teacher. I'm sorry, Natalie, blah, 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 blah. So I went home and I was thinking, what about, sometimes these ideas come to you. Just, you're a creative person. Panic clinic for public speaking. I mean, it says it in a nutshell. I called her up and I said, listen, what do you think about this? Panic clinic for public speaking. She said, yeah, I'll take that. So she put that in. And what do you think happened, Jen?
All the seats in your class were full.
Not only that, that's true, but all the people in the public speaking class took their registration back and registered.
And got your class. Awesome.
That was canceled. Wow. So then I was on to something. So so first I was teaching these exercises that train the brain so that when people are looking at you, you're not thinking about them. Part of your brain that manufactures the negative thoughts kind of begins to slow down. It's it takes a little time, and you just are kind of free. But that wasn't enough. I still didn't like the speeches; they were boring. So I created a structure with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with what you like. For example, you would start by give an introduction, and then you would say, today, I am going to talk about Jenn and her Friendzy program. And that's all you would do. So you had to practice sitting in the chair. Oh, and then there were breathing exercises, very important. Not deep breathing. That's a big mistake. Don't deep breathe. Very small breaths, using your stomach to do the pumping, not the chest, so you calm down. How to stand up, how to walk to the front, keeping your concentration, how to turn around and face the audience, and then just say, today I am going to talk about Jenn and her podcast. So you see, so you do everything. So when you learn to do that, you get a fundamental technique for dealing with your anxiety by looking at it and doing it slowly, step by step. And you learn the techniques for standing up so that eventually you don't do it that slowly. You look normal, but it's slower than when people jump up and they run to the front of the class and they stand in front of it and they look like they're
right. Well, and it's not even really in front of a class or in front of a big audience, a lot of people have trouble public speaking, even if it's in a meeting at work with their colleagues and in smaller settings. Public speaking can be really paralyzing for people. So I love that your techniques really help everyone slow it down and get out of your head and really be able to focus on what message you want to deliver. What are some other tips and tricks you can give us?
Well, but I still wasn't satisfied. The talks were stilted, a lot of numbers, and people would give generalizations. They would say, I went on a vacation. But you're more sort of a journalist. You have to say, I went to Paris. Immediately, the name is, or I had dinner. What did you have? I had frog's legs. As soon as you say frog leg, or I bought a car. What kind of a car? I bought an MG, a Porsche, a BMW. Give me a name. People really hide all their information behind generalizations. I call them empty frames. It's like a frame without a picture inside. So I developed a series of templates that you fill out, and it gives you a container for your thoughts. In other words, it frames your ideas. And for example, one template would say, I first became involved with, fill it in, about blah, blah, blah years ago. At that time, I was da, 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 da. So you see, it gives you the structure so that you can give your story. Well, when we did that, and there were many different ones, when we did that, all the speeches were amazing. They were fascinating. There wasn't one speech that wasn't interesting. Everything changed in the class. So that's what I've been teaching, and that's what's in my book, Talk Power, the Mind, Body, Way to Speak Without Fear. And that's the story.
Yeah. And Natalie, tell me about the book, because I saw there was an original edition, but the one that comes out this summer is a new edition of it, right?
Yes. Originally, I wrote this, listen, in 1984. I mean, you weren't even born then, I think.
I was 77.
You were 2 years old. In 1984, I wrote the first book, Talk How to Speak Without Fear. Then in about 15 years ago, I wrote this one. This is the...
Yes. Okay. That's the one I saw online.
And it's like a class, and it has everything in it. It has, not only does it have the training, but I also have testimonials from people, and people telling their story about how horrible it is for them to have fear of speaking in public. And people can really identify, because a lot of people who have this problem think they're the only ones. They think, but millions of people have this problem, and it ruins their lives. They can't take promotions. They drop out of law school. They can't do a toast at their daughter's wedding. They can't do a eulogy at their grandfather's funeral. It ruins their lives. Also, I've worked with children as young as 8 years old. My structure can be modified so that kids can do it. And it's really amazing. If you see them, they slow down, they talk more slowly, and it's adorable. Anyway, where were we? What were we talking about? Oh, my book. So I'm a tango dancer, by the way.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
I am. I've been dancing tango for about 18 years.
Amazing.
Well, I started at a rather old age, but I can dance just like any young person, practically. So this man, Hector, who I had been dancing with for years, I never knew that he was a senior editor at Skyhorse Publishing. And one day he happened to tell me he's also a filmmaker. So I thought of him as a filmmaker. And I said, what? You're an editor? I have this book, and it's really time for it to be published again. It's just like a classic. It's fantastic. And it has everything about how to speak in public, but it also has templates for making a toast at a christening, for making a toast at a wedding, for presenting someone with an award, for accepting an award, even for lawyers, for speaking, for witnesses. It just has everything you could possibly. It also has thing about stuttering. Oh, and that's another story that I'll tell you about stuttering. So he said, all right, I'll look at it, and I gave it to him, and he took a plane ride. So he said, I read it on the plane, and I really think it's a good book. I'm going to suggest it to my boss. And he did. I was in seventh heaven, and they accepted it. So this is
incredible.
Isn't it incredible? You know how hard it is to get a book published.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You have to have. I had an agent, but we had a kind of falling out, and so now then I didn't have the agent. Anyway, this new book, it's on Amazon now. It's called Talk Power: The Mind Body Way to Speak Without Fear. It's green and blue. It's really blue, and they're taking advance, orders for it. And it's coming out July 17th, and it's updated. Everything is more modern. Like I had examples with President Bush. Now I have examples with President Biden, and so on.
Yes. But still applicable for anybody to use these skills in their life.
If you just follow the instructions in the book, your whole life will change. I've worked with 31,000 people. Oh, and then I was with American Express. I was their consultant. I did and my boss, the first day I came to work there, I was an outside consultant. She said, Natalie, these people are very busy. If they don't like it, they're not going to come back after lunch, because it was a 2-day workshop. Well, 9 years later, I was there for 9 years. And the beauty of it was that you could put like a secretary in that class. You could put a vice president. CEOs don't do groups. They just work by themselves. But all these people came. We would have 30 people. 2 women worked for me. And I had all kinds of workshops for American Express for many, many years. It was their best outside program. Yes.
So incredible. You've done so many amazing things. I want to ask you about the tango dancing.
Oh.
Talk to somebody who is thinking about, maybe I'm too old to pick up a new hobby or a new thing. What would you tell them?
Well, the tango is especially appropriate and doable for the older woman or the older man. Why? Because it's not a fast, there is a fast dance in tango. It's called milonga, but you don't have to do that. But it's a slow, sensuous dance, bum, 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 ba da 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 da. See, that's not fast. That's slow. So for an older person who's not as agile as a young kid, it's a perfect dance. I started dancing what happened was a couple of years after my husband died, I had this boyfriend, and he was a dancing teacher. And we used to go out I was in seventh heaven because my husband was not a dancer. And I loved to dance. And the only time I could dance was weddings or bar mitzvahs, I had nobody to dance with. So I was dancing with him all the time. So one night we're in this place that used to have a dance every Sunday night. And I see this gorgeous dance with this beautiful music. I mean, incredible music. And I said, oh my God, what is that? That's the tango. And the man who was dancing was a teacher. And after the dance, I went up to him. I said, give me your card. I have to do this. This is me. And so I had private lessons for a couple of months with him. And then I started going to what we call milongas. And I did a shocking and horrible thing that is never, at that time, was never done. I asked men to dance. And that was the biggest crime. I mean, that was like,
you're such a rebel.
Are you kidding? There are men to this day who will not dance with me. This is like almost 20 years later, because I asked them to dance 20 years ago. It's just not done. In Argentina, forget it.
Wow.
There were men who would dance with me. And so I would go, what else am I going to do? In the evening, it's so boring to go out to dinner every night. I mean, all my friends were doing that. I would go dancing. And, the thing is, it's even in the winter, it's freezing cold. You go out it's 9 o'clock at night. It's pitch black. You go into this office building. It's very quiet. And then you open the door, wham, and there's all this music and this dancing and this conversation and this socializing. It's just amazing. It's the most wonderful thing. And the thing that I love is, because I'm not a drinker, is there's no drinking really, not much. Maybe they'll have a pitcher of wine, somebody will have a glass, but it's really about dancing.
Mm-hmm. So I love it that at 67, you picked up a new hobby. You said, that looks like me. I want to do it.
I also learned how to drive when I was 65. Just learned to drive because I bought a house in the Catskills, and you had to know how to drive. You couldn't go on the bus all the time.
Sure.
So I bought a car and I started driving. And I insisted that my daughter learn how to drive too. When I picked her up in front of she came with a bus and I picked her up. She could not believe that I was driving this.
You were starting driving when most people are telling their parents not to drive anymore. You were just getting started. I love the way you approach this. Now, I wanted to ask you about lying about your age. Why did you feel like you had to lie about your age for many years?
Well, I always looked much younger. I always looked much younger. And, there is so much ageism and prejudice against women who, after they're 35, that it was, even when I had my baby, this is a story. When I became pregnant, I was 40 years old. But I always said I was 30 or 25, whatever. So I put down that I was 30 years old. So that's how it went. And it was even on the birth certificate. Or it was whatever papers there are. So when I took my baby, I had a perfectly healthy, gorgeous baby, 7 pounds, 9 months, everything, natural childbirth. And one day when she was like 3 months old, I brought her to the obstetrician, right? Isn't it?
The pediatrician?
Pediatrician. Yeah. And I happened to mention very casually that I was really 41 years old. Well, she had a meltdown. She went nuts. She really said, how crazy, you didn't have amniocentesis, blah, blah, blah. You could have had, blah, blah. I said, well, I didn't, and I'm fine. And the baby is healthy and beautiful. What do you want from me? But she was so upset. How could you lie about your age to the doctor? I said, I just didn't even think about it. I just did it normally. In my mind, I was 30.
Maybe that's the secret. It's just keeping it in your mind that you are younger than you actually are and believing it. Tell me about how you feel about your age. Is it a state of mind, truly?
It is a state of mind. Well, you see, the thing is, you have to take care of yourself. I don't take any medication whatsoever.
Amazing.
And if I have a problem, I try to figure it out. And I'll give you like an exercise, and this is kind of a little off, but I found that I was starting to have trouble standing up, that I was holding on, and I didn't like that. So what I did was every time I had to stand up, I would sit down again and I would stand up. Oh, this chair moves. I would stand up 5 times. And I would keep doing that. And I could feel muscles growing in my legs. Even though I was dancing, I still had to do that, especially paying attention so I would stand up 5 times up and down, maybe about 6 times, 7 times. How many times do you stand up during the day? And I did that for a couple of months, no problem. Then I started having some problems with my hand, just slightly. You get these little hints that something's happening. I would shake my hands, and I bought that thing that you squeeze. And then I started lifting weights. Every time after the shower, I go in my bedroom. I have these like 5-pound weights, and I do that like about 20 times. And then I have a trampoline my son-in-law gave me. I jump on the trampoline every day for about 5 minutes after my stretching. And as I said, if you eat properly and and the big thing is, don't get fat. Don't gain weight. If you gain weight, you're going to get diabetes. You're going to have a short life. So I think, I was very inspired. There are women that are 100 that are doing gymnastics. And if you look at them, they're very trim, and they're taking care of themselves. So that's the secret. I wanted to tell you a story about my assistant, though. That's a really funny story.
Yes, do tell.
Well, I am not good on the computer. I mean, I do email and I do Word, but I'm not, it's a different generation for me.
Sure.
So I always use IT people, and sometimes they're not really very professional. So I had gotten rid of my most recent IT person. This is 5 years ago. And in my elevator, I see a sign, and it says, I'm very good on the computer. I only charge $20. I mean, my God, are you kidding? Well, of course, not to let an opportunity pass by, I call. Boy says, hello. I said, hello, can I talk to Manny? I am Manny. I said, oh, you're a girl. I thought you were a boy. I am a boy. All right. So we get beyond that. We make a date. He comes to my door, knocks on the door on Sunday. I open the door. There's a tall man and a little boy. So the tall man looks me over and he sees I'm a neighbor. He's seen me on the elevator. We never spoke. He goes away and leaves the little boy with me. The boy comes in my apartment. How old are you? I'm 11. What do you want? What do I want? My Skype is not working. It sits down. Wasn't installed properly. What else? I said, well, my passwords are driving me crazy. Fixes that. That was 5 years ago. He's going to be 16 years old now. He still works for me 3 days a week. I went to his bar mitzvah and I have a picture his grandmother took. I am a head taller than him. Well, you should see this guy. He's a man. I always look at him and say, who is this guy? He's tall, broad, amazing.
And he's grown up with you.
But he does he's a genius. I'm telling you, all these things that I apply for, even the application for you, the letter for you, I dictate, he writes, he types, he fills everything out, he installs things. If I have an emergency, like with my book, I had an emergency, I call him up. Sometimes he'll come, sometimes he can't come. He's on the 8th floor, I'm on the 11th floor. And then when the time comes for him, 5:30 to leave, he's strictly business. That's it. He stands up. He's going.
So great.
He's socializing.
I love this friendship. This is really cool.
It is a real friendship. And all my friends are so jealous because he really, no matter what, yesterday he was doing something and I was asking him to let me look at it. What was he doing? I think. Anyway, let me look at it before he sends it to my editor. He said, look, you just don't have confidence in me. I know what I'm doing and I have confidence in myself. I said, well, all right, okay.
I love that you have an assistant that you met when he was 11. This
11
is amazing.
When he was 11, he could do amazing things. There's nothing on the computer that he cannot handle, that he doesn't. I say, how do you know how to do this? Anyway, okay.
That is so cute. I love that so much. Okay, so Natalie, tell me, if you were going to give women one piece of advice in their 40s and their 50s, what would it be?
Well, your health. I think it has to start with your health. Mm-hmm. If your body is in good shape because you're taking care of it, never mind vacuuming your living room every day, you know what I mean, or your mahjong game or whatever you do, take care of your body, be healthy so that you have energy. I mean, I have this fantastic energy, but it's nothing special. It just comes because I'm taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. That would be my advice, that you have to, I weigh myself every single morning. Not because I'm obsessive or crazy, but because I want to know what's going on. And if I feel I've gained a pound or two, the next couple of days, I'll take it easy. You know, it's not that I don't eat dessert or whatever, but, you know, I try to control what's happening to me. That would be, and the other thing would be learn how to do the tango. I mean, the tango is amazing. It's wonderful, especially if you live alone or you're divorced or you're a widower. Learn how to do the tango. It's a social world. It's just wonderful. It's not advertised. You don't hear much about it, but it's an international community. I even went on a tango cruise a couple of years ago. It was really fabulous. I went to Italy and I danced with all these Italian people, guys, you know, and it's just wonderful.
I can see it by your face that it just lights you up when you do it.
But this year has been awful because we haven't danced for a year. You know, it's close embrace. But now I heard about a studio where they are dancing with masks. So I'm going to try something on Saturday.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Did you get your vaccinations?
2, yeah.
Good.
Oh, I would never go dancing with somebody without a vaccine. That would be a terrible thing to do.
Oh, awesome. Well, Natalie, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I can't wait to read your book. I'm in.
All right, so let's grab a quick question out of the You Don't Know My Life box. And the question for you today, Jenn, is what is a provocative image or inscription that you've worn on a t-shirt?
Oh, good question. Provocative image. Okay, the one I can think of, it says on it, evolution of authority. Okay. And it starts with an animal footprint and it ends with a high heel.
Oh, nice. That is very nice. Yeah, that's like empowering. Where mine's not so much.
That's the only one I could think of
No,
where
I
I
think
have
this.
words on
Do
my
you still
shirt.
have it? Do you still have it?
I do. It's upstairs. I can go get
nice.
it and show you.
Oh, I'd love it. I don't have this T-shirt anymore. Back in the 2000s, where it was trendy to have some of these provocative T-shirts. I wore a T-shirt to work because I work in radio, and you probably I was working with you when I had this on, but it was
I wonder if I remember it.
It was an outline of North Carolina and South Carolina, and it said North Carolina because we like to be on top. And I had a lot of those T-shirts at the time because it was a trend, I think, to have all those printed T-shirts. And I was dating somebody who was in a more professional career, more professionally dressed career. And when she would spend the night, she would get frustrated because she's like, there is nothing in here that I can wear. Like, I can't wear any of these shirts.
I cannot borrow your clothes.
I cannot wear the North Carolina on top T-shirt. So, yes, because we like to be on top.
I don't remember you wearing that one.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
so
have it
cute.
anymore. So Jenn Hobby has this week's mirror mantra.
Well, today we've talked a lot about speaking up. So I want you to repeat after me. Okay?
I'm ready.
It's all about speaking up. I will use my voice to lift the conversation.
I will use my voice to lift the conversation.
I will share my unique perspective because it matters.
I will share my unique perspective because it matters.
I will speak up to elevate another woman.
I will speak up to elevate another woman.
Because sometimes we don't do that, right? Sometimes we
and now you may kiss the bride. No, go ahead. I felt like I was saying vows. Okay.
So just remember that if you are strong and you can share your opinion for another woman, it will help her use her own voice next time. And I find that we have the chance in situations to be each other's keeper, to be sisters and lift each other up. So your mirror mantra for this week is I will speak up. I'll use my voice to lift the conversation. I'll share my unique perspective because it matters. I will speak up to elevate another woman.
I'm really hoping that now that women play more sports, because I think that's where the bro code comes from. I think boys for a long time were part of these collectives where you rely on each other. And in sports, it's like you play one position, but you rely on the other position for success. And women just were discouraged from sports, and some still are. But I think now it's more just understanding it's healthy, it's exercise, it's good. And it's good for women to be part of a group like that, because you have to understand that your position is supported by another position. And if you work together, you achieve success. And I'm hoping that we have this understood sisterhood where, hey, that rhymed, where understood sisterhood.
That's going to be the name of our album.
Because we love names. We're going to have to go get the understood sisterhood. But because because guys have the ability to be angry with each other and then get over it in 10 minutes and drink a beer. Usually. I mean, I'm stereotyping, but that's usually, I mean, in the men in my life, I've seen disagreements that were resolved very quickly over common ground. And I have not necessarily seen the same speed at recovery with the women in my life. And I think that we're taught to think, oh, we're so emotional, it's hard for us to handle our emotions, which I think is such crap. I think it's the fact that we are just not used to the idea that we are important, other women are important, and it's important for us to play on the same team. And, I think that it's come out in politics where women are usually divided and usually do not support female candidates as much as is expected them to do, because I think women tend to see other women and think what's wrong with them first. It's like a defensive. We're defensive against each other. I think a lot of times where we should be automatically supportive, and that's what guys do. They're automatically supportive of another guy. Don't even know him, don't know where he's from, but they know they're going to find something in him they like. And women need to learn that same practice. That you meet a woman, and the first thing you need to think about is there's something about her I'm going to like. I just know it because she's a woman. So I think if you speak up, tell your story, allow her to do the same thing, then you will find that thing that you like about each other. All right. See there?
Boom.
If you know somebody who would like the Friendzy just as much as you just did, right? Because you love us, please share this with her. Plus, our brand new YouTube channel is live with videos and extended interviews. And if you like this show and share about it on your social media, we ask that you please tag us so that we can share it too.
Please subscribe to the Friendzy podcast and leave us a review. You can also sign up for our weekly email, and we send the episode right to your inbox. And we promise not to bug you. We only send one each week with the new show. So you can sign up at thefriendzy.com. We add all kinds of different links from the show in our newsletter. And we just want to say, go over there today and sign up, thefriendzy.com.
That's right. We make it easy on you. And also, we want to thank listeners who have already subscribed to our email list. Again, at thefriendzy.com. Friendzy is how you spell Friendzy. These 3 new names are Wendy Larzinger, Virginia Chapman, and Kia McCullough. I feel like I need to do it differently. Hold on, Jen. I'm going to give Wendy, Virginia, and Kia a better shout out. Wendy Larzinger, Virginia Chapman, and Kia McCullough. Come on down. And thank you for subscribing to the Friendzy.
I love it. Soundtrack produced by Tammy Hurt for Placement Music, written and recorded by Placement Music creative team member Mark Daniels.
The Friendzy is produced by Bo Johnson. Graphic design is by Helen Vickers, and web design by Caden Jacobs.
These are real stories connecting real women. Now it's time to go share yours. So thank you so much for the gift of your time. We appreciate you.
All right. So until next week, trust your gut.
Share your story.
And stop lying about your age. Yeah. We'll see you next week. Speak up.
Melissa Carter in the building.
I just scared the cat. The cat's like, don't speak up. I'm running out of the room.